Hi, I'm Rick Fussell and welcome back to the Ingrain Workshop. Last month, the supervisor and her foreman planned a summer vacation for us to Washington, D.C. Now, none of us had ever been and some of us really didn't want to go. But if I was going, I was going to try to come up with some ideas for a shop project. And I did just that. Just like Nicolas Cage in National Treasure, I got myself a copy of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence in one of the gift shops, and I came back here to the workshop and designed these two flag frames. That's coming up next here at the Ingrain Workshop. So for this flag project, I went to the big box store and just picked up some standard 8-foot 2x4s. I picked up 4 of them. I hope that's going to be enough to finish this project. So the first thing I'm going to do, my flag length has to be 53 3/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is here at the miter saw, go ahead and cut those down to the exact length that they need to be. The problem is the stripes need to be at a width of 2 3/16 of an inch, which means I'm only going to be able to get one stripe out of each 2x4. So I'm going to get one stripe out of each of these two 2x4s, and that's going to be the top and the bottom stripe of my flag. And I'm going to cut those here at the miter saw at exactly 53 3/16 of an inch. So I like to start by squaring up one end of the 2x4. And then I'll go ahead and set a stop block up here at my miter saw so I can make consistent repeated cuts. So now I need to cut the lengths of all the other stripes on the flag. And because this is going to be somewhat like a picture frame that's going to frame the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, these stripes need to be at a length of 16 7/8 of an inch. And I'm going to make all these cuts here at the miter saw. I've got my two 2x4s at the original 8-foot length, and then these two are the scrap pieces from the previous cut. And I'm just going to cut everything to 16 7/8 of an inch here at the miter saw. So here at the table saw, I'm going to go ahead and cut the widths of the stripes out of the 2x4s. And the first thing I'm going to do is just saw off the 1/8 inch roundover on both sides of the 2x4s. That'll give me a nice 90-degree surface for the long grain. And then I'm going to take and cut them down to 2 3/16 short for the widths of all the stripes. All right, so now with all the pieces cut out, the stripes are cut out, you can kind of see kind of my vision here. Again, I've never done this before. This is just an idea I had. So what I'm going to do is the flag itself is made to the correct ratio for a flag of this width and length. The reason why I made it the width is because I'm going to be installing it up here where my overhead door is. I'm going to have the Declaration of Independence on one side and then the Constitution on the other side. So for it to fit up there, I was kind of restricted as far as the width of the flag. So for the Declaration of Independence, this works out fine. For the Constitution, some of the names down at the bottom of the Constitution are going to have to get cut off, and that's fine as long as I get the Constitution itself on there. And again, if I had a bigger space, I'd make the flag bigger. Of course, if you make it wider, you have to make it longer. The Union has to be bigger. You know, the proportions all have to work out. So both the flag for the Constitution and for the Declaration of Independence are going to be the exact same size. I believe they're 28 inches by 53 3/16. So that way they're consistent, and then when I do mount them over the overhead door, they'll somewhat be symmetrical for right now. So that's my game plan. I'm sticking with that. So the next thing I think I'm going to do is kind of try to lay out where the waves are going to be, because again, this is my first time. I'm going to try to make it a wavy flag. And then also I'm going to just try to make it look as if the Constitution and the Declaration are kind of burning through the flag itself, or like a cannonball or something hit the flag. And I'll just make some irregular carvings around the opening so it won't be just a straight square or rectangular opening. So for the end of the flag, I want to make it really tattered looking, as if this flag was actually flown in the Revolutionary War. So I went ahead and scratched out some lines in pencil, and now I'm just going over them with the permanent marker. And then once I get these all laid out, I'll do the same thing with the picture frame opening, going around the picture frame, take off the square rectangular shape, and make it look as if the Declaration and the Constitution are literally burning through the flag itself. So with all my pieces cut, I now have laid out, this is going to be the Constitution flag. So I've got my opening for the Constitution, and that's what I'm trying to keep square. So I've squared the edges on the inside to make sure that they're square. I'm not that concerned about the outside edges because this is going to be a tattered American flag. So I'm going to make it look like it's actually been ripped and maybe in the Revolutionary War, hopefully. So the ends, I'm going to take and tatter the ends, the bottom, the top. I'm also going to make waves in it. So let me bring you in and I'll show you kind of what I've laid out here on the Constitution flag. So I've just taken a permanent marker and just laid out the tattered look on the end of the flag. And I'll take, and before I glue up anything, I'll take and cut these out over at the bandsaw. The lines here at a 45-degree angle, these are going to be the valleys. And I'm going to take and carve these out with a cut saw blade and make it look like it's waving or blowing in the breeze. And then here along the perimeter of the Constitution opening, again, I'm just making it look like it's weathered, and I'm really going to burn, when I do go to burn the flag with the torch, these edges here I'm really going to burn, make them really dark, make it look like the Constitution is literally burning through the flag. That's the concept or the idea. And then on the Union side of the flag here, I've pretty much got the same thing going on. I've got my lines set up, which are going to be the valley points for the waves. And then I have some tattered here on the bottom edges and then along the top. So before I glue anything up, I've went ahead and numbered all the pieces. They're numbered. There should be a total of 13 stripes. And I've labeled them stripe 12 left and stripe 12 right. That way I can just keep everything organized. So like I said, before I glue everything up here, I'm going to take and cut out everything over at the bandsaw. Of course, I'm not cutting out the 45-degree valleys. This will just be a guide for when I carve it. But for right now, I'm just going to cut out the tattered sections of the flag before I glue it up. So even though I'm cutting out the tattered sections of the flag here at the bandsaw, if you didn't have a bandsaw, you could probably do this with a jigsaw. You would need an extended blade or a longer blade because you're cutting through a 2x4. But other than that, you should be able to cut it out with a jigsaw or a bandsaw, and just take your time and follow your lines. Now that all the tattered stripes have been cut out, it's time to glue it up. So I'm just going to use some Titebond glue to glue it up, and I'm also going to use an ink roller. If you don't have an ink roller, I'd highly recommend getting one. I'll leave a link in the video description where you can pick one on Amazon. They're really cheap and they're really easy to clean up, and for spreading large areas like this, you really can't beat having this ink roller as a glue spreader. It works out really great. So I'm just going to go down here, spread the glue, and then start putting the stripes together on one side, and then I'll do the same thing to the other. And then what I'm going to be more focused on is squaring up the inside of the picture frame. I'm not that worried about the outside of the flag since it's going to be irregular anyway. I just want to make sure that the picture frame on the inside is square. So with the glue dry, it's time to take it outside and start the carving. I'm using an angle grinder. It's just a cheap Harbor Freight angle grinder, and it's a knockoff cut saw blade that I picked up on Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the video description below. I think there was a pack of 3 or 4, I can't remember. But they worked out just fine. Again, this isn't hardwood, this is just soft pine. So I started cutting in the waves or the valleys for the flag. And, you know, again, this is my first time doing it. But what I noticed is if I use the edge of the blade to start the cut and to cut it to maybe 1/4 of an inch deep, then use the flat part of the blade to carve out the actual valley itself. And then once I get down to that 1/4 inch depth, then I do the same thing over again. I turn it on the blade's edge and cut through the center of the valley another 1/4 of an inch deep, and then take and lay it flat and cut out the valley down to that next 1/4 of an inch, and just progressively keep going down until I get to the depth that I want to be. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this, just have fun doing it. I had a great time doing it. Like I said, this was my first time, and you know, this just brings out the creativity process of the project, and this is kind of what, you know, I normally don't do, so it's nice to be able to really be creative doing a project like this. So I swapped out the carving blade on the angle grinder and switched over to a floppy sanding disc, and I started with 80 grit and hit everything with 80 grit just like I was when I was carving, and then I bump it up to 120 grit and do the same thing. And don't worry, I'll leave links in the video description to all the tools and equipment that I used on this project. Now with all the sanding done, after I hit it with the 120 grit flapping disc with the grinder, I brought it into the workshop, hit it with some 220 with the random orbital sander, and then I took and hand sanded it, and we're now done with the sanding. The next thing I need to do is cut a rabbet on the back of the opening here, which will allow me to install a glass panel and a 1/4 inch back panel for the picture frame. So I'm going to take and turn it around here, and then using my router with a rabbeting bit, I'm going to cut a rabbet all the way around the inside of the opening. So upon further review, I probably should have clamped this flag down before I started routing this rabbet on the back of the flag. You can see it sliding there on the blanket, so hindsight's 20/20, but next time I will have it clamped down. So once you route the entire perimeter of the opening, it's going to leave rounded corners, and you really want straight 90-degree corners. So I'm just going to bust out a chisel and chisel out a 90-degree corner at each end of the picture frame. Okay, all the sanding and carving is now complete. The next thing I'm going to do is take and use a torch and go ahead around and burn the flag a little bit. I'm going to do this outside, not here inside the workshop. And what I'm going to do is around the tattered edges of the flag, I'm really going to burn that dark. Also along the inside of the picture frame, because I want it to appear as if the Constitution is literally burning through the through the flag. And then I'll just go ahead and give the face of the flag just a light burn, but down in the grooves where the waves are, I'll probably darken those a little bit more to make the wavy flag kind of stand out a little bit more. So that's what I'm going to do next. So now with the flag burned with the torch, I'm going to go by and just get some painter's tape and go by here and just mark off the different stripes. The white stripes I'm going to leave natural, and then I'll stain every other stripe red with a barn red stain, and then I'll tape off. Once I get the stripes done, I'll tape off for the union, and then do the Union Blue. I think it's denim blue is the color of the stain I'm going to be using. But for right now, I'm just going to tape everything off with just some painter's tape. So I'm going to be using a Minwax solid color stain, Barn Red. I think I picked this up at Lowe's, and I'm just going to hit all the red stripes. I'm going to wipe it on with a foam brush and then just take a cotton rag and wipe off the excess. Next, I'll stain the Union, and I'll do it the same way that I did the red stripes. And this is the same stain manufacturer. The color is denim blue. While the stain dries over here at the table saw, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the back panel for the flags. I'm going to do both, the one for the Constitution flag and the other for the Declaration flag. So that finishes up the cut for the back panel. The back panel is a 1/4 inch plywood, which is really, I think, 7/32 of an inch. And it's also 20 3/8 by 24 3/8. This is going to be the back of the Constitution and the flag. Next thing I need to do is cut a piece of glass the same size. I went ahead and picked up some glass. I think it was 24 by 36 at one of the big box stores. It's 3/32 of an inch thick. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the glass the same size as the back panel. So I have a piece of 1/8 inch plywood that I know has a straight edge on it, and I'm just going to use that to lay out the size of the panel, and then taking a permanent marker, I'm just going to mark the glass. And then once I get it marked, I'll use this same guide to cut the glass using a glass cutter. I'll take and clamp the guide down to my table so it won't move, and then I'll cut the glass, scoring it only once, and then I'll use some 3-in-1 oil just to lubricate the glass prior to cutting it. Also, you want to make sure you're always wearing safety glasses and gloves while you're cutting the glass. You definitely don't want to cut yourself. And then once you score it the one time, you should be able just to move it to the edge of the table and just break off the extra piece. For the Declaration of Independence flag, I decided to use my star stencil and just spray the stars with white paint. Once the paint dries, I took some 320 grit sandpaper and just scuffed all the stars down to just kind of give it that rustic vibe. For the Constitution flag, I decided to do something a little different with the stars. So I laid out my star stencil, and then using an awl, I just punched a hole in the center of the star to mark the locations for the stars. Once I had the locations laid out, I took all my stars and I put them in a coffee can full of water and let them soak for a couple of days to really make them very pliable. This way I could bend the stars over the waves of the flag so they would sit flush on the flag itself. Once the star was conformed to the flag, I would take my torch and just heat it up enough just to dry out the star, and then I could put it back in place to make sure it's still conformed with the flag. And I did this all prior to gluing them to the actual flag itself. To fasten the stars to the flag, I'm just going to be using some CA glue and accelerator. For the Declaration of Independence flag, I'm going to be using some high gloss lacquer. I'm going to apply 3 coats, waiting about an hour between recoats, and then on the final coat, I'm going to knock it down with steel wool before applying the final coat. For the Constitution flag, I'm going to be using a water-based polyurethane. The same application process. I'm going to apply 3 coats, waiting about an hour between coats. Then I'm going to sand the whole flag down with some 4-aught steel wool and then apply a final 4th coat. For mounting hardware, I'm just going to be using these sawtooth hangers, and I'm going to fasten them to the back of the flag with some 3/4 inch screws. You just need to make sure that where you're screwing these into, they're the high points on the front side of the flag. That way you don't drill all the way through your flag in like a valley. Next up, I'm just going to install the glass and make sure it's nice and clean and everything. And then once I get the glass clean, I'm going to insert the United States Constitution in the frame itself and then put the 1/4 inch plywood backing behind the Constitution. To fasten the 1/4 inch plywood back to the flag, I'm using some 1/8 inch hardboard. I just cut them in these little strips, and then using a 3/4 inch screw, I slightly tighten it down, but not too tight, so I can pivot the plywood scrap, and this will allow me to take the back panel off if I ever need to. I don't think I am, but I went ahead and installed 4, 2 on each side. Thanks for sticking with me through this build, folks. These two tattered American wood flags are more than just woodworking projects. They're reminders of the foundation of our country. One carries the words of the Constitution, the framework that still guides us today. The other holds the Declaration of Independence, the bold statement that set everything in motion. I gave both of them that weathered, battle-worn look on purpose. I wanted them to feel like they'd flown through the Revolutionary War, seen the smoke, the struggle, and the determination of a people who refused to give up. Every burn mark, every worn edge tells that story. If you enjoyed this build, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Which one speaks to you more, Team Constitution or Team Declaration? And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join in the Ingrain Workshop. We've always got sawdust flying, tools in motion, and plenty of projects lined up. The supervisor says I'm only allowed to make one mess at a time, but between you and me, I think she's just giving up trying to keep sawdust out of the house. So until next time, take care, keep building, and never forget the history written into the grain of our nation. Well, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please leave it a thumbs up. And please hit that share button. It really helps the video out there in the YouTube algorithm. Now, let me know in the comments section below which flag you like better. Are you Team Declaration of Independence or you Team U.S. Constitution? Now, don't be intimidated by the carving aspect of this project. I had zero carving experience when I did this. I started with the Declaration of Independence, and then the second one was the Constitution. I think my artistic flair and my carving ability got a little better from the first one to the second, but let me know in the comments section below. If you're new to the channel and you like DIY and woodworking projects, then I highly recommend that you smash that subscribe button. It's free and painless, and I'd also ask that you ring that bell icon. That way you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. To all my existing subscribers, I really appreciate all the support that you give this channel. Now, I'll leave links in the video description below to all the tools and equipment that I used on this project. And as always, I'm Rick with the Ingrain Workshop. Have a wonderful day and God bless.